Hi there, Wallis.
Hi, Rosanna. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Very
Good.
cold, but good.
Yeah. Cool. I'm sure people will be joining in a couple of minutes, so
No worries.
thanks.
Where are you based? Are you in the UK? Or
I'm in the UK at the moment. Yeah, I'm in London, but I'm home really for the month. I'm actually generally based in Barcelona, so
so you're
I'm
like
not I'm not
getting
used
the
to this
worst of the
cold.
weather. Yeah. All my friends in
Yeah.
London were sending messages because they got stuck on the overground yesterday and it like snowed and was like
Yeah.
sparking and stuff. And so yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like the infrastructure just breaks down, doesn't it, in this
I
country when
know.
snow
Oh my God.
comes.
Yeah.
Anyway, no, I mean it was actually quite a nice week last week, blue skies and cold, so can't
Yeah,
complain.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
cool. So I guess the others are finishing,
Yeah,
and then we'll just get going. I'll introduce you, of course.
that's great. This is such a nice platform. It's really easy
It's
to
cool,
use.
isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
really easy to use. Yeah.
So, what is a quick question? Are you working for EIT Climate, or are you working for the Swedish International Development Corporation?
No climate kick.
Climate Kick. Okay,
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
checking. Yeah.
But the partnership that we work on, so the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership, is between both. So it's
Yeah.
between Climate Kick and CEDA, yeah.
Cool.
No worries. Just checking this works. Yeah, it does. Fab.
Hello, good morning, everybody. We'll just give a couple of minutes before we get started, as I think one of the other sessions was just finishing. So I'll just leave it one more minute and then we'll get going. Thanks. Okay. I imagine that we will have people rolling into the session coming from the previous one. Good morning, everybody. My name is Rosanna West. I am the HEI Initiative Manager. Some of you here may know me already if you're already participating in a project. And for those of you who are joining from the wider public, a very warm welcome to you. So I'm really pleased today to introduce our next speaker from Systems Innovation Learning Partnership, Wallis Grant. So just to give you a quick overview of how the session will work, Wallis is going to give her presentation, and then at the end of that, we will have some time for questions. So feel free to throw your questions into the chat function. There's also a Q&A function on the side of the main presentation screen, and I'm sure Wallis will be happy to answer those. So yeah, we more than welcome any questions, so please don't hesitate there. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Wallis and say a big thank you and warm welcome to you, and we're looking forward to your presentation.
Great, thanks, Rosanna. And hi, everyone. I hope you're all staying warm if you're cold, or enjoying a little bit of the warmth for us in the cold. As Rosanna said, my name's Wallis. I'm the communications manager for the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership, and I work for EIT Climate Kick. So I'm going to go through a little bit about the partnership today, and I've left quite a big chunk for us to have a discussion at the end. So feel free to put any questions, or even if you just have a comment about how it's working, feel free to pop that in. So I guess one of the things I wanted to take it back to is kind of the basics of where the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership came from. I think all of us who work in this space are aware that we're facing kind of urgent and rapid growing problems. We know that we don't just need single point solutions, but we need to change the systems that we live in. But one of the things that is often left out of the conversation is the discussion around mindsets and capabilities. So not only do we need to make new technology and approach things in a different way and find out new innovative projects, we also need to shift kind of mindsets and skills of people in the system to be able to work in this way, and also to be able to work in complex systems and between ones, as we know that everything is kind of interconnected and very, very complex with the issues we're working on. So just to kind of give a little brief overview, the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership is between EIT Climate Kick and the Swedish International Development Agency, which gets called SIDA. And what's interesting about our approach is that it's kind of an equal partnership in that we have representatives from SIDA and representatives from Climate Kick who are working kind of collaboratively on this partnership. And it's not just kind of SIDA funding us to do this, but a real equal kind of level of work there. So the partnership as an approach is a way to bring organizations together to tackle complex issues and to understand how we can collaborate, experiment, and learn. So the space that we're trying to say is we don't have all the answers yet in terms of how things work. We don't have all the mindsets and the skills yet. So let's create spaces through our activities that allow us to develop those skills and to also develop skills in organizations to work in that way. So we also work to kind of create tools out of those and methods that are successful in enabling systemic change. And we also want to create a kind of ecosystem of ideas and innovations that can work across whole systems. So we're all about kind of sharing our learnings and collaborating and hearing what others are up to. So if you have any of those today, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then, as I said, our kind of main focus is around shifting mindsets and supporting people to transform the way we view issues in that way. So I think most people here will know what systems change is, but I wanted to kind of just give an idea of what we mean by systems change. So when we're talking about, for me, one of the things that I find really useful to think about is to think what the opposite of systems change is. So when we think about a new piece of technology, although that is great in terms of tackling climate issues or issues of food insecurity or any of those topics, if you just implement that technology and don't think about the kind of wider stakeholders or the ripple effects, that's called a single point intervention. So we really want to look at projects and innovations and ideas that think about the impact of something on a whole system, whether that's having a piece of technology, but how that works to include citizens, how that impacts funding and finance, behavior, governance and policy. We want to try and get people to think about the system rather than just implementing something and walking away. So it becomes a lot more of a complex process in that way, but the results are that you have a wider impact and that you can make that kind of transformation on the systemic scale that we need. So some of our activities to date, we're quite a new partnership, so we only came around last year. So a lot of our projects are quite early stage, but these are the buckets of work that we kind of sit in. So annually we hold a learning festival. We held one last year online, which is really our kind of public facing approach to bring in people and to have really diverse conversations around systems change, systems innovation, and to really set the table out and say what's working, what's not in the space, how can we improve, what does that mean? And for next year, our learning festival will be in April or May. So please look out for that if it's something you're interested in. We then have our deep dives, and for anyone, this is unfortunately Climate Kick language, so I'm going to try and bring it down and explain it. But the idea is that between every sort of 2 months, we bring together people and really have a kind of explored understanding of experiences and approaches and methods around a particular topic. So it basically just means creating space where people can come together and talk about their learnings, talk about things in a space that isn't focused on KPIs or anything like that. It's just creating a space. And we also have particular tools that we use to kind of facilitate that. So it's allowing people to have an analysis in a way that they normally don't do. Our learning labs, so these are something a little bit more longer than our deep dives. These work across 1 or 2 days. And this usually means that we take a particular approach brought by someone in our community or someone kind of adjacent to it. And we talk about what are the ways that we can learn from it? Are there any interesting systems approach that we can do? The most recent one we did was on impact investment. So we brought impact investors into the room who don't really work in the systemic way and tried to give them some tools and ideas of ways to approach investing that could mirror some of the systemic approaches we're looking for. And then finally, we have our experimentation fund. So I'd say this is one of the most kind of practical elements and more concrete ways that we're working across the partnership. So we are, by next sort of spring, we're going to be aiming to fund 10 systems innovation projects or approaches in the Global South. We're doing this in a participatory grant making model. So we're bringing in experts across the whole of the world who are coming to analyze our applications. And we're also creating it in a 2-stage project, but I will kind of go a little bit into the projects a little later on. So these are kind of the overview of the activities that we do, but I wanted to give a little bit of a focus to 2 in particular that we work on. Excuse me. So one of the first projects that we did last year was to do one of our kind of learning labs with people who work in the climate space in Moldova, and we did this over 6 months. So the idea was to put a focus on the stakeholders in this area in Moldova and help them to understand and develop their skills and capabilities needed to work together. So this could mean bringing in climate change experts, people working on programs in a government level, but it also meant kind of bringing in unusual actors, so maybe people working in HR and procurement, different areas that maybe don't specifically work on climate, but are part of the process of being in a government and being in an organization that functions in this way. I didn't attend this one, but I have attended another one. And one of the things that's really interesting about the way that we approach it is that you have people in the room who spend a lot of time together and who maybe speak on a day-to-day basis. But using our particular tools that we have for drawing out discussions or using kind of ways that we map different projects, what you start to have is people's different perspectives coming in and having that equality of perspectives in the room. So having more junior people or people, as we said, who normally are not in these discussions, giving ideas for how to make things work. And it helps to kind of set that innovative mindset. And it also helps people to understand that there are tools to approach this way in a different way. So our approaches are always about learning and finding ways to do learning well. So this was kind of the approach. And then from there, they were able to kind of align on ambition for change. So look at the next possible steps and implement some of the techniques and tools into their kind of everyday work. And then the experimentation fund, which I mentioned earlier, and I just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into this. So as I said, the fund is looking to support innovation projects in the Global South. And we not only want to fund, it'll be around 10 eventually with, it's supposed to be 100,000 euros. But what we want to do is we want to create learnings that can go between the cohorts. So really create a kind of diverse portfolio of people who can come together and learn while they're doing the approach. But also to generate those learnings and kind of share them with the wider system. And the ideas that we're looking for are really early stage projects that have either never been implemented before in that area, or they are novel in terms of the people who they are approaching. And because this project is with SIDA, it's wider than just climate. So we look at things such as food insecurity, gender inequality, human rights abuses, climate's obviously in there, but kind of the big challenges that we're facing as a world, and saying, are there novel and interesting ideas that we can help develop and kind of support people to try something new, and even if it doesn't work, but learn from that in that way. So one of the things that's really interesting about the fund is that we're also trying to create more of an experiment space in the way that we run program funding. So we actually just closed our fund applications last week, and we got over 300 applications, which was incredible. And I've just been going through them this morning, and some of the ideas are just really, really great. But what we'll do is we have two stages to the fund. So we will ask our group of experts who are outside of Climate Kick and outside of SIDA and who work across systems innovation across the world to help us evaluate which programs will go forward to the next stage and what programs will sit well as a portfolio. So really complementing each other. And we'll have around sort of 15 of 20 of those applications, and we'll give them a micro grant of 2,000 euros to develop that idea over 8 weeks, and then come back to us and do a final ideation. And 10 of those projects will go on to secure 100,000, sorry about the mistake there, 100,000 euros to develop their ideas more. And throughout the year, they'll have kind of points of coming together and points of coming to us to do that. So I think what's interesting about the approach of the fund is that as a team, we've really had to kind of throw out our playbook in terms of how we normally do programs and funding, and think about how we can be more flexible, more experimentational, more adaptable, because that's what systems innovation projects need, and that's what they need to do to kind of approach that in that way. So you're probably thinking, what can you learn from this? And just to kind of say, the partnership that we have with SIDA is not just for between Climate Kick and SIDA. We're looking for other organizations who want to come on board, who want to really commit themselves to this approach. And as what we do is we make sure that any of the techniques and the approaches that we use towards learning, we also do internally as well. So we run internal workshops to develop those capacities at SIDA and Climate Kick. But some of the ideas, given the kind of areas that you are all working in, thinking about, were, as I said before, we've really taken a kind of experimental approach and tried to widen our ideas of what we can do in terms of these kind of approaches. And although with funding this can be really difficult because there are lots of different boxes you have to tick and make sure that money's being spent right, there are ways that you can make it flexible, ensure that kind of marginalized voices are heard, and that there's much more power for the grantees involved. And this is not new, because lots of feminists, for example, funders are doing this, but it's new for us, so it's been kind of interesting to do that. I think also there's something around the approach to learning. Myself, personally, I've had to really pivot myself to trying to learn more on a daily or weekly basis, rather than kind of thinking, okay, at the end of a project, what can we learn from this? And that's about kind of shifting your mindset and thinking, how can we adapt? How can we be iterative? How can we approach this in a more flexible way that allows us to learn within each other and beyond, and say, it's okay if this doesn't work, but to kind of take risks and apply it. And then I think the last thing is that we really want this partnership to be a key part of bringing together other systems innovation experts and interventions. I mean, there are so many people who are working on this, and given the area is not just climate, it's really broad. We want to make sure that we're learning from what others have done before, that we're sharing our learnings and kind of committing to that, and seeing how we can, just kind of make sure that the wider ecosystem becomes better, and that we can use those approaches to kind of tackle these big issues. I'm going to come back just to check on the questions and if anyone had any, but that's kind of where we were with the partnership. But I'm happy now to take any questions or any thoughts from anyone, to go for that.
Thank you so much, Wallis. Really interesting presentation, and yeah, exciting what you guys are doing. I can't see any questions at the moment in the chat, so please do make sure that you put those into the chat, everyone, if you have them. I have a question, so I'll kick things off. I'm wondering, what are the major kind of bottlenecks or challenges that you find when it comes to bringing people together and learning from each other? This might be a very broad question, but I think it's a relevant one for anyone thinking about how they might work collaboratively with others.
Yeah, definitely. So I think one of the biggest things we face, and from both CEDA and Climate Kick, when we try to do things internally as an organization, is time. People don't have any time to come together for 2 hours of a deep dive workshop, or there's other work that takes priority. So I think what we're trying to bring home internally, and also with organizations that we work with, that the taking time to learn together and taking time to come together in an unusual setting allows us to have these new ideas and to have these new approaches, and ultimately will help, because you're going to change the capacity for people to work in this way, and not to feel like they just have to work in the kind of status quo way. But that's a huge issue that we have. And if anyone has any ideas of how to kind of sort that, please tell us, because it's something we constantly have. And I think one of the other things is that I did just mention is funding. Like, we are really lucky that the funding that we have at the moment from CEDA is very flexible. And so, for example, with our grantees that we had for the experimentation fund, we ran an info session where grantees were asking us, how much can we use as organizational spend, how much can we use on admin and things like that, because people who work in these spaces are used to funds and grantees that are so strict on what you can do with it. And I know that comes from a place of wanting to spend money well, but ultimately, if you really want to fund something that's experimental and unknown, there is an idea that it may fail, but that's okay in this space, because we will learn something from it. We will learn, okay, that didn't work, or maybe it can work differently in the future in a different way. And so I think, for me, that's the most exciting thing, is that we're getting to really explore in a partnership way with our kind of eventual grantees, that we don't have all the answers. We know that you don't have all the answers either, but maybe together we can do that, and we're trying to do it in a really flexible way. So we trust you to use the money. We know that you will kind of do that in a good way. So for me, that is one of the most exciting spaces, and lots of people are working to make that kind of better.
Thank you, Wallis. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we do have a few questions that have come into the chat, so that's great. I'll start with Anne-Marie's question. So she thanks you for your really interesting presentation and asks what your advice would be to anyone wanting to apply to your process.
Yeah, so I think let me just go back to our activities so that I can explain. So at the moment, we're still trying to kind of work out what our tiers of, I don't want to say membership because that's not very nice, but people we work with, like how we kind of define them. And I think for anyone who wants to become a partner, one of the things that we kind of stipulate is that people put funding into it. That's kind of the approach, and also that they commit to being an active partner of it, not just a funder who walks away, but someone who like is involved with the process. But for example, with the Learning Festival, we will be looking for speakers and interesting people to kind of explore if they're doing research or projects in this way, to bring questions and ideas and that kind of thing. So that's something we will definitely be looking for external people. But for example, we as the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership, we could come and do a deep dive or learning lab with your organization to try and see if there's a particular topic that you're working on or a particular issue, and kind of work with you and use our techniques that we know have kind of worked in the past to focus on those areas. For the fund, unfortunately, we just have closed applications last week, so we're not taking any more in terms of that going forward. But we're hoping that the fund will have another round at some point. So please look out for that, and that will be kind of that way. But yeah, we're really open, and these are not. We're not stuck to doing these activities. We're really open if someone comes to us and says, here's an idea for a project, how can we do it? That's part of being this kind of flexible approach to it. So please do get in touch.
Great, thank you, Wallis. And Anne-Marie's giving you a thumbs up, so
Thank you.
Great. Okay, we have another question. It may be kind of linked. This is from Dr. Matsek. Sorry if I didn't pronounce that correctly. Are you currently searching for partners? And if yes, what partners exactly are you searching for?
Yeah, I think as everyone in the space is looking for, is funders is a big thing that we're going after. But as I mentioned, we're always open to different collaborations and different people that we've spoken to. So at the moment, CEDA is our main one, but we're having kind of ongoing conversations with different organizations about how we can bring some of these to them. So I unfortunately can't, there's not any that are like secured yet, so I can't say anything, but it's a really wide and diverse group of people that we're looking at. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Wallis. And then we have a question from Adita. Asking, in the model that you presented, you mentioned citizen participation. What are some ways we can involve citizens more in the partnerships from your experience?
It's a really, really good question. I think, so kind of twofold on this. I think with some of the deep dives that we do, particularly with governments at kind of local government level or city level, we do try to make sure that there are citizens involved in that who are either, if it's someone in climate who are aware of kind of climate issues, or there's something affecting their area, because we understand that people who live the experience day to day will have much more of a kind of just bring something to the table that government officials, for example, won't. But that's something we could think about in terms of our learning festival. Like, how do we bring citizens in, and is there more room in terms of exploring that? But I think the model before that I was giving was just a kind of overview of how we view systems change, and I think citizen participation is such a huge part of that. And with the projects we're funding on the fund, we're so aware of which groups of people are you targeting, which groups of people are you thinking about? Are you thinking about the vulnerable people in your community when you're bringing these ideas? So that's a real, for us, that shows that people are thinking a systems way if they're highlighting those.
Great, thank you, Wallis. Okay, I think that's all from the questions, and we're coming to the end of the 30-minute slot, so that's great timing. Let me thank you again for your presentation today and telling us more about the Systems Innovation Learning Partnership. So yeah, thanks again to everyone for being here as well. So I'm sure a prompt will pop up in a minute for the next parallel session. But yeah, thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wallis. Okay, just a note, if you've seen pop up there in the announcement that the third parallel session will start after a 15-minute coffee break. So you have 15 minutes, and then we'll be back with the next parallel sessions at 11:45. Thank you all.